On June 17, 2026, Microsoft's own security researchers published a threat intelligence report confirming something that should have been the biggest tech story of the year, but barely made it past the crypto press. Since February 2026, a piece of malware Microsoft internally tracks as Trojan Win32 crypto bandits had been spreading silently across Windows machines through infected USB drives. And once it landed on a computer, it did something almost nobody outside a security research lab had ever thought carefully about. It began polling the Windows clipboard roughly every 500 milliseconds, watching, waiting, reading everything that got copied. When it detected a cryptocurrency wallet address, a 12 or 24-word seed phrase, or a private key, it captured that data instantly, sent it across a hidden Tor network connection so investigators couldn't trace it, and in many cases, quietly swapped the copied wallet address for one the attackers controlled before the victim even pasted it. People lost their entire crypto holdings in a single transaction they thought they were sending to themselves. But here's the detail that should genuinely alarm you, even if you have never touched cryptocurrency in your life. The malware didn't need to break into your bank account or crack a password. It simply read your clipboard, the same exact place where Windows 11 already stores, by default configuration paths that are shockingly common, a rolling log of the last 25 things you have copied on your machine. Your two-factor code, your bank routing number, your actual password. If a script built specifically to drain crypto wallets can quietly harvest a wallet address the instant it lands in that clipboard space, ask yourself honestly, what else, sitting in that same space right now on your computer, is just as exposed? I want you to actually sit with this for a moment before we go any further. Think back over the last 30 days on your Windows 11 computer. Not just the emails you wrote, everything you copied. The password you pulled from your Notes app and pasted into a login screen. The bank account number you lifted off a statement to fill in a payment form. The two-factor authentication code that showed up in your email or text message and lasted maybe 30 seconds before you used it. The home address you copied out of a delivery confirmation. A confidential number from a work document a colleague sent you over Teams, a private message from a family member that you copied into another app to save it, the credit card number you typed once, then quietly kept copying from your own notes because retyping it was annoying. Every single one of those pieces of information, if a specific setting sitting quietly inside your Windows 11 machine right now is active, has already been written to a persistent database file on your hard drive, and in a meaningful number of cases, uploaded to a Microsoft server tied directly to your Microsoft account, sitting in cloud storage you never consciously decided to use for information this sensitive. Let's walk through what actually changed and when, because this is not some brand new feature Microsoft slipped in last month. Clipboard History first appeared back in Windows 10's October 2018 update, but it stayed a relatively quiet, mostly local feature for years. Windows 11 took that same idea and wove it much more deeply into the operating system, expanding it, surfacing it during setup, and tying it far more tightly to your Microsoft account and its cloud sync infrastructure. The original clipboard, going back decades in Windows history, was actually one of the cleanest tools from a privacy standpoint Microsoft ever shipped. You copied one thing, it lived in temporary memory, you pasted it. The second you copied something new, the old item was simply gone. No log, no database, no persistence. Restart the machine and whatever had briefly lived in that clipboard ceased to exist entirely. It was limited from a workflow standpoint, but it was clean, and the data had almost no lifespan at all. Modern clipboard history changes that completely, and to be fair, the change is framed as a productivity upgrade because, in a lot of ways, it genuinely is one. Instead of holding one single copied item, the system now maintains a rolling log of up to 25 things you've copied, covering text, images, links, and formatted content, all accessible through that Windows key plus V shortcut, appearing right where your cursor sits. You scroll, you click the item you want, it pastes. For anyone juggling multiple documents, moving content between apps constantly, or reusing the same strings again and again through the day, this is a meaningful improvement to how you actually work. I use it. Plenty of people use it. That part of the story is completely fine on its own. What doesn't get explained clearly enough anywhere is what Clipboard History actually does with those 25 items behind the scenes. It does not hold them in temporary memory the way the classic clipboard did. It writes them to a database file stored directly in your user profile on your machine, a file that persists across sessions, survives reboots, and does not automatically clear itself the moment you copy something new. That file quietly accumulates everything that has passed through your Ctrl+C or Ctrl+X commands since the day you turned the feature on, and it just sits there on disk. Then there's a second toggle, sitting directly beneath Clipboard History in the settings panel that most people who enable the feature never read closely. It's called Sync across devices. When automatic sync is switched on, everything you copy gets uploaded to Microsoft's servers so it can be pasted on your other Windows devices signed into the same account. Every item in that rolling 25 item log text, links, and in some configurations, images, traveling out over the internet into Microsoft's cloud infrastructure, tied permanently to your identity. Microsoft's own documentation confirms clipboard history can be enabled entirely independently from cross-device sync, and that the sync feature specifically requires a Microsoft or work account, meaning local accounts, without one are automatically excluded from ever syncing at all, which tells you plainly how account-dependent this whole system really is. And you have to honestly ask yourself, is your bank account number, your password, your two-factor code, your private family messages, content you actually want sitting on an external server somewhere? For most people who genuinely sit with that question, the answer is no. And yet that is precisely what happens the moment automatic sync gets switched on, often without the person even realizing which toggle they clicked. Stay with me, because before we're done here, I'm going to show you a second setting that has nothing to do with the clipboard at all, but is doing something just as serious with everything you type, and almost nobody knows it exists. Let's go through the security picture properly first, because I want you to understand the full scope of what's actually at stake here before we get into fixing anything. There are entire categories of malware, and the Crypto Bandits campaign from earlier this year is a perfect real-world example, built specifically to sit quietly in the background and read clipboard activity without you ever being made aware it's happening. That threat existed even back when clipboard held just a single item. But persistent clipboard history changes the entire attack surface. Instead of one temporary item that vanishes the moment you copy something new, there is now a standing database file on your machine holding your last 25 copied items, and that file doesn't require any special permission or hacking skill to view. On a shared family computer, that data is visible to literally anyone who opens the clipboard panel. On a single user machine, it remains a liability the moment that device is lost, stolen, sold secondhand, or sent in for repair. Think about what an entirely normal computing day looks like for most people. You open your bank's website and log in, you copy your account number to paste into a payment form. Clipboard history quietly records it. A two-factor code lands in your email, and you copy it into a verification box. Clipboard history records it. You open your password manager and copy a password for another account. Recorded. A colleague sends you a document with a sensitive figure, and you copy it into a spreadsheet. Recorded. A family member sends you personal information through a messaging app, and you copy it to save into your contacts. Recorded. None of that sequence involved you doing anything careless or unusual. That is simply how an ordinary person uses a computer on an ordinary day, and every one of those data points is now sitting in a log that anyone with physical access to your machine or any piece of malware running on it can pull up in roughly 2 seconds with a single keyboard shortcut. Here's the layer that took real digging to fully appreciate, and it matters most for people who assume the cloud sync concern doesn't apply to them because they never turned automatic sync on. Security researchers have repeatedly documented that this cached clipboard data can survive restarts and even manual clear commands in certain configurations, creating real exposure if malware, a shared device, or a forensic recovery tool ever gets access to the right directories. The local database file lives inside your user profile, and while Microsoft does encrypt data in transit whenever it's synced to their servers, the local file itself is not protected in a way that stops anything running with administrator-level access on your machine from reading it directly. That is exactly the privilege level most modern malware, including Clipper campaigns like the one Microsoft disclosed in June 2026, operates at once it has already executed on your system. There's also a pinning dimension almost no coverage of this topic ever mentions. Pinned items inside clipboard history become permanent, reusable quick insert blocks that survive both reboots and the manual clear button entirely. That means if you or anyone else who has used your machine pinned a copied item at any point, hitting clear does not remove it. That pinned entry stays sitting in the panel indefinitely until someone manually deletes it through the 3-dot menu next to that item. I've talked to people who cleared their clipboard history and genuinely believed everything was gone, only to discover weeks later that a pinned item they'd forgotten about was still sitting right there. Clearing history does not mean what most people assume once pinned items enter the picture. So let's go through this together right now, step by step. Because I want you to have the exact path in front of you with zero guesswork involved. Do this while you're watching, not later. Because later has a habit of never actually arriving when it comes to privacy settings like this one. Press the Windows key and I at the same time. That opens the Settings app directly. In the left sidebar, click System. Then scroll down the list on the right until you see Clipboard and click it. You're now on the Clipboard settings page. and everything relevant to this part of the conversation is sitting right in front of you. The very first thing you'll see is a toggle labeled Clipboard History. Look at it right now and note whether it's on or off. This is the setting controlling whether Windows maintains that rolling persistent log of your last 25 copied items. It ships off by default on a clean installation, but it gets enabled constantly through setup prompts, feature update recommendations, and quick tips, and once it's on, it stores plain text, HTML content, and images under 4 megabytes in that persistent local database. If that toggle is switched on right now, that means at some point, whether during initial setup, after a feature update prompt, or through a settings recommendation you clicked without much thought, this feature got turned on for your device. That's the first thing to establish honestly with yourself. Here's how I think about the decision between your two real options. And I want to be straight about the actual trade-offs, instead of just telling you to switch everything off blindly. If you disable Clipboard History entirely, you lose the Windows key plus V panel completely and go back to the traditional single-item clipboard, one copied thing at a time. Nothing stored, nothing persistent, nothing synced anywhere. From a privacy standpoint, that is the cleanest possible outcome. Your attack surface for copied data shrinks back down to almost nothing because there is no persistent file sitting around and nothing available to upload. If you regularly handle sensitive information, financial data, legal documents, client records, login credentials, this is the option I'd recommend without hesitation. The convenience loss is real, but the risk elimination is total. If you genuinely rely on the multi-item clipboard for your daily workflow and don't want to give that up, the middle path is keeping Clipboard History enabled locally while switching sync to manual only, so nothing gets automatically pushed to Microsoft servers. You keep the local convenience while cutting off the cloud exposure. Just understand that in this configuration, the local Clipboard History still sits in plain, readable form for anyone with physical access to your machine, and the local file remains a real target for any malware specifically built to monitor clipboard activity, the exact category Crypto Bandits falls into. If you choose this middle path, build a habit of pressing Windows key plus V and hitting clear all at the end of every session, or immediately after copying anything sensitive. Regardless of which option you land on, there's one action you need to take right now without delay. On that same clipboard settings page, look for the option labeled Clear Clipboard Data, or simply Clear. Click Clear All to wipe everything currently stored in your clipboard history that hasn't been pinned. That deletes the existing log immediately, every password, account number two-factor code, and private message that's been quietly accumulating in that database since the day you turned the feature on, gone in a single click. Do that now, before you move on to anything else in this video. And remember the detail about pinned items, because pinned entries survive the clear all action and stay sitting in that panel indefinitely until manually removed one by one. So after you hit clear all, press Windows key plus V again and actually look at what's left. If anything is still showing, those are pinned items. Click the 3 dots beside each one and delete them individually. Don't assume the panel is empty just because you pressed the button. Check it with your own eyes. One more thing before we move to the second setting, and I want you to genuinely hold on to this because it matters long term. Turning off a toggle stops new activity from being recorded going forward. But it does not delete anything that has already been saved. You have to clear that separately every time. And more importantly, every major Windows feature update carries the real potential to reorganize or reset privacy settings you had already configured. This is a documented, recurring pattern. Following the Windows 11 24H2 update, multiple privacy-related settings were reorganized across different parts of the settings interface, and a meaningful number of users found configurations they had previously set were no longer sitting where they expected, or in some cases had quietly reverted. This isn't necessarily Microsoft resetting things out of malice. It's more often a side effect of interface changes and new feature rollouts that introduce toggles, which subsume or replace older ones entirely. The responsible habit here is opening your clipboard settings and verifying your configuration after every significant Windows update. It takes less than 2 minutes, and it genuinely protects you over time in a way most people never bother doing even once. Now let's talk about that second setting, the one I mentioned right at the start, the one that has nothing to do with the clipboard at all, but is doing something equally serious with your data on most Windows 11 machines right now. This one sits deeper in the privacy menu, carries a name that sounds completely harmless and gets skipped by almost every privacy guide out there. It's called inking and typing personalization. Once you understand what it actually does, it's genuinely hard to believe how little attention it gets compared to the clipboard conversation. Here's what it does in plain language. Inking and typing personalization collects samples of what you type, write, or dictate on your device and sends that data to Microsoft's servers so the company can analyze it and refine its language models and personalization features. Microsoft's own documentation states plainly that it collects, quote, samples of the content you type, write, or dictate on the device, as well as details about the voice, inking, and typing input features on the device. Read that again slowly. Samples of the content you type, not anonymous keystroke timing patterns, not vague metadata about typing speed, samples of the actual content, the real words themselves. To be fair, Microsoft's documentation states that this content gets processed with unique identifiers removed before analysis, and some privacy guides consider the core custom dictionary relatively harmless on its own. But whether that level of processing is enough for you to feel comfortable with typed content, leaving your device is a question only you can answer honestly. Even though this specific personalization data is primarily processed locally, it still involves analyzing what you type or write, which by definition can include sensitive words, names, or phrases you never intended to share with anyone. There is a real risk of that sample data being shared with Microsoft if optional diagnostic data collection is also enabled, which happens to be the default state on a huge share of Windows 11 installations. And this is the compounding factor that makes this setting more serious than it looks in isolation. When inking and typing personalization sits active alongside optional diagnostic data, those two settings work together in a way that sends considerably more of your input behavior to Microsoft than either one would on its own. Here's exactly how to find this setting and shut it off right now. Press Windows key plus I to open settings again. This time, in the left sidebar, click Privacy and Security. Scroll down through the options on the right side until you find Inking and Typing Personalization and click into it. Once inside, switch the Custom Inking and Typing Dictionary toggle to off, which stops keystroke and handwriting sample data from being saved and tied back to your Microsoft account. Your keyboard keeps working exactly as it always has. Autocorrect still functions normally. Text suggestions still appear wherever an application provides them independently. Touch keyboard and voice typing continue working in their standard modes. The only real thing that changes is that Windows stops collecting samples of your typed content specifically for transmission to Microsoft's servers for analysis and model training. But don't stop there, because there's a second toggle connected to this exact same data pipeline sitting on a completely different settings page. Go back to Privacy and Security, then click Diagnostics and Feedback. Inside that page, find and toggle off Improve Inking and Typing, and while you're there, also toggle off Tailored Experiences, which stops Microsoft from using your diagnostic data to personalize tips, offers, and product recommendations shown inside Windows itself. While you're already on this page, look for the Delete option under the Diagnostic Data section and click it. That clears stored telemetry already sitting on Microsoft's servers. Required diagnostic data collection continues going forward regardless, but the historical record that's already been gathered gets removed. That's an important distinction to hold on to. You cannot fully stop Microsoft from collecting the minimum required diagnostic data on consumer editions of Windows 11. That baseline exists to keep the operating system stable and secure across hundreds of millions of devices. But you absolutely can shut off the optional stream, and you absolutely can delete what's already been collected. While you're in this part of the Settings app, it's worth knowing about a related piece most guides skip entirely. Windows Search, by default, personalizes results using content pulled from Bing, OneDrive, Outlook, and other services tied to your Microsoft account, meaning your search behavior inside the Start menu can be shaped by information across your entire Microsoft ecosystem unless you turn that integration off. And going back even further than any of this, Windows has been building toward exactly this kind of data collection model since Windows 8.1 first introduced an advertising ID tied to your account for analytics and personalization purposes, an idea that expanded significantly under Windows 10's default Express setup settings starting in 2015, which by default sent contacts, calendar data, and what Microsoft internally called associated input data back to its servers to personalize speech, typing, and inking recognition. None of what we've walked through today came out of nowhere. It's the continuation of a data collection philosophy that has been quietly expanding for well over a decade, one feature update and one default setting at a time. There's one more layer worth knowing if you want to be genuinely thorough here, and it has nothing to do with settings toggles at all. If your hard drive itself isn't encrypted, a lost or stolen device gives whoever has physical possession of it direct access to pinned clipboard items and cached data the moment they power it back on, regardless of which sync settings you've configured. Turning on device encryption through Settings, Privacy, and Security, device encryption closes that specific gap, and it takes only a couple of minutes to enable on most modern hardware. It's a small step, but it's the kind of small step that matters enormously the one time your laptop actually goes missing. As of the current update cycle in 2026, Microsoft has continued consolidating and relocating some of these privacy settings into different spots than where they sat in earlier versions of the operating system. So, if you come back to check any of this after a future update and something is moved, that's expected behavior, not a bug and not you doing something wrong. Use the search bar directly inside the Settings app and type clipboard or inking, and the relevant page will surface regardless of where it's currently been relocated within the menu structure. That search approach remains the single most reliable way to find any privacy setting in Windows 11, no matter which build or update version you happen to be running. Here's what I want you to actually do before you close this video. Go check your clipboard settings right now if you haven't already done it while watching. Verify the current state of inking and typing personalization. Clear your existing clipboard history, including any pinned items you might have missed the first time through. Delete your accumulated diagnostic data from the feedback page, and then send this video to one person in your life who uses Windows 11 every single day and has never once thought about any of this, because the gap between what these settings actually do and what most people believe they do is precisely the kind of gap this channel exists to close.